Hey, Optimal Nation, and we are back with another episode of the Optimal Health Show. In this week's podcast, you're going to be learning the top 7 best natural alternatives to the most prescribed drugs. And it's going to be a fantastic show because it's crazy today. Almost every single person in North America currently is on some form of drug. That's ludicrous. So that's why I got my good friend, Dr. Andrew, to stop by on the show. And he's going to be talking to you about his take on what are the best 7 natural alternatives. Now, Dr. Andrew is a board-certified chiropractic physician who serves the Treasure Valley region. Now, before we actually begin today's podcast, I just want to give out a huge shout out to one of the members of the Optimal Nation, and that is Frank Hulse. And I've been watching Frank for a while, and he's doing amazing things. You know, he's always looking for ways to optimize his life, his diet, and well-being. So I applaud you, Frank. Awesome job, brother. Keep it up. Now, before we actually get into today's podcast, I just want to make sure if you guys had the opportunity to head over to iTunes, leave a review, increase our rankings, because the more reviews we get, the more impact we're going to make globally. So now, please sit back, relax, and enjoy today's amazing episode with Dr. Andrew. Dr. Andrew, are you with us?
I'm right here. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. And when you approached me about this topic about alternative approaches to these prescribed drugs, I was like, wow, what a great idea. And I'm quite excited actually to learn myself on what you approach your clients with, these natural ways. So why don't we just jump into it and let's talk about these 10 natural alternatives.
Absolutely, Ameer. And I think your listeners probably share a lot of our same philosophy that drugs have a place in our this topic. The mission is to educate people to know what they can do in lieu of drugs, because in my opinion, there's plenty of doctors who have the ability to give a patient a drug, but there are precious few doctors who know how to solve a problem without a drug. And if the problem can be solved without a drug, that's what we should do. The United States, and I practice in Idaho, and I've lived in the U.S. my whole life. We represent about 4% of the population on Earth, but we use over a quarter, 25% of all the drugs. So certainly this is an issue me and my fellow countrymen are dealing with probably more than anywhere else in the world, but it's United States, we have a big drug problem.
You said 25%.
25%. That is right.
That's big.
It's it's a big problem because not only is that going into people's bodies who take the drugs are also flushed down the toilet in hospitals and houses. They're also, when someone takes a medication, the medication is detoxed by the body and then it's urinated into the city water supply. So in a sense, even if you're part of the minority in America that don't take drugs every day, you're exposed to them. So we all have a vested interest in removing excess medications from our society because they act like toxins and they get into the water supply. There was a study in 2011 from the British Medical Journal that made some waves, and what it showed was that women taking birth control in areas of the world where that is more common, there's more prostate cancer. And the idea is that women take birth control, and typically birth control is a molecule called ethinyl estradiol, and that's about 100 times stronger than estradiol, the natural human estrogen. So we see women taking birth control, they're taking an estrogen that's 100 times stronger than normal estrogen, and then that gets into the water supply. So when guys go down to the pub and they go to the game, they grab beer and they're drinking water and soda and all the stuff out of their tap water for on and on throughout the years, they actually get exposed to that estrogen too. So water treatment doesn't remove these medications, and I'm using estrogen as an example, but water treatment doesn't even touch that stuff. So estrogen that women take is causing prostate cancer in men, and that's what this study proved. It's fascinating to me to see those connections.
Definitely. So what are these top 10 natural alternatives that we're going to be talking about today?
Well, Ameer, we're going to be talking about the most commonly prescribed drugs in America. These are going to be drugs that your listeners are going to be familiar with. They're going to have hydrocodone, for one, is the number one prescribed medication in the United States. And hydrocodone is often combined with the active ingredient in Tylenol, which is called acetaminophen. And so we're just kind of going to go through these top 10 and just describe what they do, help educate your listeners about what the drug does. And then because we're thinking beings and we can problem solve, we can look at the natural world. We can look at nutrients, lifestyle, things that you are always talking about, like getting good sleep and taking care of your mitochondria, how that can help do the same thing as the drug, and therefore the need for the drug would practically go away. But starting with hydrocodone, that's 131 million prescriptions a year.
Oh.
And that's a big painkiller. So pain is the number one complaint that people go to a doctor for. I don't think that's unique to the United States, but why do you go to the doctor? Well, because I hurt or I don't feel good. Okay, fair enough. We're all on the same page there. But we know so much about natural medicine and the ability to suppress inflammation naturally that an alternative to hydrocodone would be probably a first line approach, which would be, and as I talk about these 10 drugs, your listeners will hear some of the same things repeated over and over again. I mean, not to oversimplify the issue, but people with eating fast food and processed food and GMO food and not sleeping, working out improperly, not working out at all. I mean, all this lifestyle stuff that yourself and others like you in the natural medicine world are so focused on, it really tears up the gut, and that causes a lot of inflammation. So I would say that in general, most clinically what we see is that most inflammation in the human body is gut derived. And what that would mean to your listeners is that 70% or more of your immune system lives right alongside the GI tract. And if hydrocodone is being prescribed in such large quantity, that's an indication of a lot of inflammation. And you cannot have pain in the human body without inflammation. It's physiologically impossible. So if the biggest drug in the world is a painkiller, then we say that the biggest problem in the world is inflammation.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So inflammation, we know we would want to start with the GI tract, because that's the source of at least, we'll say 70, maybe 80% of all inflammation that we experience throughout our life and each day comes from our digestive system. So, just go to a mall in America, go to a football game, go to a major league sports, and just observe your fellow person. And it's not a judgment on people. It's not a condemnation of them as people, and to say that they're bad, that they're doing anything wrong. It's just that there's a lot of imbalance out there. There's a lot of obesity, and certainly obesity creates inflammation. Fat tissue doesn't just sit there quietly on your body and kind of ho-hum along while you live your life. It's
Yeah.
It's pro-inflammatory tissue, and it's it feminizes men and it masculinizes women. So it's sort of, there's nothing good about having excess fat tissue. But my interpretation of the hydrocodone being so commonly prescribed is that we're just so inflamed. We've got electromagnetic stress. We've got poor nutrition. We've got stressful media and movie. I mean, every time you turn on the TV, it's sex, violence, stress, destruction, and then here's Tom with the weather. It's just like we don't get a break from this high stress world. So I think that the natural alternative to hydrocodone is to work on your digestive system, to eat a modified elimination diet. And any of your listeners can probably Google that, find lots of information. It would just if you're a listener and you know someone who might be dependent on hydrocodone, the recommendation for the natural alternative to this would be find someone in your area, like Ameer would be somebody, or someone like myself in the United States, and there's lots of people out there in your area that can help you with this. If not, you can just reach out to Ameer or myself or other practitioners, and even just send us an email, and you'd be surprised. And I'm sure, Ameer, you can relate. You've probably helped people all over the country or even the world.
Actually, my whole practice is online. I don't even have a physical office. I travel way too much, go to too many conferences, and I speak around. So I don't have the luxury to be at one location. But that's the beauty about internet. Even though it's, we kind of hate technology, let's use technology to our advantage and let's benefit the people who don't have access to us physically. So yeah, the world of online healthcare is the fastest growing way that you can help yourself out. And Dr. Andrew does this. I do it myself, and it's fantastic.
Amen. The internet has blessed us. It gives us an escape. The internet gives you an escape module from the medical matrix. I mean, if you didn't have access to this information, you would go to your primary care doctor, and you would really not have much alternative to take these medications, because that's really what the model is. The problem with this whole medical system right now is it's symptom based and it's pharmaceutical based, and it's not actually geared towards solving problems. And we could do 10 shows on that, but we'll focus on
yeah, that's right.
on helping someone on hydrocodone get off. So if you're on hydrocodone, theoretically, I can't give advice about medication. That's not what I'm doing today. I'm just talking about how you would support systemic and metabolic health to create a situation where the inflammation would go down in the body and the pain would go down, thus the need for medication would also be reduced. You heal the gut, you work on a gut protocol, you go see somebody who can help you with your physical ailments, a good chiropractor that you trust, someone who's good with functional movement and exercise training, get you on the right kind of diet for your body, which will probably be a paleo style of eating, some rendition of that. And I would expect that if people on hydrocodone took that approach, took high doses of fish oil, because fish oils are known, the EPA in the fish oils are typically the omega-3s are either EPA or DHA most of the time, and the EPA fraction is very anti-inflammatory. It's basically Mother Nature's version of a aspirin or a Tylenol. So I would suspect that if patients with hydrocodone issues, if they got their gut fixed and got on anti-inflammatory nutrients like fish oils, turmeric, ginger, and many others that are out there, that would be a good natural alternative for that. The next drug is also probably even more famous than hydrocodone, is the statin. It's a racket, unfortunately. And I say that because cholesterol has no bearing at all on whether someone gets heart disease or has cardiovascular disease. And that might sound like a heretical or a heresy to some, but the science has really just proven that over and over and over again. This idea that high cholesterol is a bad thing is oversimplification. So statins are used. For those who aren't so familiar with this, statins are used to lower cholesterol. And what statins do is they block an important chemical reaction that happens inside of every cell in your body. Technically, the term is it's HMG-CoA reductase. And that's just, the weird language that scientists and chemists use to communicate to each other. But basically, all you need to know is that statins prevent the ability to make cholesterol, yet simultaneously prevent the ability to make CoQ10, which is so strange to me that CoQ10 is known to be so helpful for the heart and the brain and the muscles. It's just a fantastic molecule. It's found in every cell in your body. Its scientific name is called ubiquinone because it's ubiquitous. It's found everywhere. That's what CoQ10 is. So people on statins don't make CoQ10. Not having CoQ10 by itself is a risk factor for heart disease and poor health. So how could giving someone a drug that inhibits your ability to make CoQ10 in fact benefit you? It's again, that's not scientifically valid approach. So we in my culture, especially in the United States, I don't know if it's the same in other countries, drug companies are allowed to advertise directly to the population. I mean, you grab magazines, you look at TV, you go and, you're sitting in a restaurant, they've got a game on TV. between plays at halftime, it's just there's drug commercials all over the place. Is it the same in Canada?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same around the world. There's just a little bit variance in it, but yeah, they're trying to definitely brainwash everybody out there. And I just want to rewind a little bit back then. I always stress this importance that, listen, ladies and gentlemen, cholesterol creates your hormones. It's that plain and simple. Your testosterones, your estrogens, your DHEA, your pregnenolone, your progesterones. Without cholesterol, you have no primary hormones. If you don't have hormones, well, that's called disease or sickness, right? So this whole thing of lowering the cholesterol, which the numbers get lower and lower and lower, every year, it's crazy. And definitely people are getting brainwashed. And I don't want you to become brainwashed. We're going to unplug you from the matrix and educate you on the fact that cholesterol is your friend.
Absolutely, Ameer. I love that idea. Now, have you you've noticed cholesterol numbers in the people you've worked with? Have you seen a trend that they're going down?
Yeah, well, they're going down more or less, but like we're slowly kind of gearing towards particle size lately. So, lipoprotein size from like A to B, or just call it like simplistic fluffy or dense particle size, which is I'm kind of more concerned with, because also with the cholesterol, you can see the integrity of the cell membranes.
Absolutely. I'm definitely right there with you. I just what's fascinating, I've been working on a personal level in my life who's trying to with fertility issues, and we did cholesterol testing on this nice young woman, and she has cholesterol of about 126 and triglycerides of 26. Now a medical doctor or cardiologist might just grin ear to ear and say, "My gosh, you are blessed. You have the greatest cholesterol ever. The lower it goes, the better you are." And I'm gonna propose an opposing point of view to that idea. What if blood pressure was treated the same way as cholesterol? Okay, so if high blood pressure is dangerous, and we could all agree that puts us at risk. We don't need high blood pressure, But if the same attitude was used in cholesterol, which is bad is high, low is good, lower is even better, what if the same was applied to blood pressure? People with blood pressure below 90 on their systolic are getting into a very dangerous decrease in blood pressure where oxygen cannot be delivered to the brain, and there's all kinds of problems that can come from that and other tissues. So I just think it's so ignorant to treat cholesterol like a one-way street where nothing else in the body works that way. I mean, you can drink enough water and kill yourself, or you can die of dehydration. It's all about balance.
That's right. So what kind of advice would you give someone if they're about to start a statin?
Well, what I would tell that person is consider the evidence first and foremost. Don't take my word for it, but take the best minds in scientific literature. For example, an article was published in 2009, the American Heart Journal, major heart journal in the United States. And they followed over 136,000 patients. So you remember from science class, N equals 30. It's not a valid study unless N equals 30. Well, in this case, N equals 136,000. So the validity is top notch. And they looked at LDL levels. And LDL, the bad cholesterol, quote unquote, people went into the hospital with coronary artery disease at the same rate, whether cholesterol was high or cholesterol was low. Therein lies the problem. So the idea that someone would be about to take a statin, it's bad science. Okay, so there's niacin, high dose niacin, B3 has been shown to be as effective as statins at lowering cholesterol, exercising more, taking soluble fiber, increasing the fiber in your diet, which would bind cholesterol as it's being released in your intestine and pull it out of your body. Part of the whole cholesterol problem is probably a deficiency in fiber and excess inflammation in the body.
Eating too much sugar too, increase in triglycerides from the liver production, LVLDLs. So that's all connected. And going back to your point one, we were talking about the elimination diet. That also goes hand to hand with balancing healthy lipoproteins within your cholesterol.
100% true. I totally agree. And, I think that what I've noticed, some of the sickest patients that I've, been blessed to help recently have actually had very low cholesterol, and they've been the most miserable patients. They've had the most difficult experience of all patients. I think that people with high cholesterol typically actually feel pretty good. I mean, they might not feel like they're in shape. They may have other health problems, but someone with low cholesterol, they suffer. They cannot work out. Their workouts are stagnant. They're going to plateau or even get weaker as they start to go to the gym more. They get sick a lot. And it's because of what you said earlier, correctly talking about hormones. I mean, if your cholesterol is like 130 or even below 150, I would say sends up flags for me. 150 is the lower level of normal. If your cholesterol is 150 or lower, it is 100% guaranteed that you are not making enough hormones. And as you said, Ameer, correctly, your cell membranes. I've been doing some research recently, and you have to be able to make triglycerides. If you're very low, you're basically hypoglycemic. You're a meal skipper. You're going 6-7 hours without eating. You're waking up not eating breakfast. And the person who I've met that this matches it's someone who's into health. But what they've done is they've done so much reading on their own on the internet of what foods are good and what foods are bad. They've kind of paint themselves into a corner where they're afraid to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just amazing to me that, God has blessed us with like this ability to problem solve. And sometimes the most simple ideas give patients the most incredible change. And if you're starving yourself, you're going to feel terrible. I don't care how many thousands of dollars you spend on supplements. It'll never fix your problem if you're starving yourself. So I'm always on the lookout for people who are starving themselves because it does happen and they do get sick. So.
Yeah, definitely, especially with our chronic stressed out lives. We got to control our blood sugar levels.
Yeah, everybody out there listening, if you skip meals, so if you skipping meal, and I think Ameer would agree, I'm not speaking for him, but I think we're both on the same boat. 3 meals a day is really not going to cut it in our fast-paced world. Skipping a meal is going anything probably over 4.5 to 5 hours. I would say it's, anything over 4 hours is getting dangerously close to skipping a meal. And what you will end up doing is you may not have an appetite when your next meal comes. And the reason is that you've been eating, but you've been eating yourself. You literally have been eating your muscle tissue, your brain tissue, your tendons, and your protein stores inside your body when you skip meals. And that's not good. You don't want to do that long term because you're going to break yourself down, and it's not good for your health. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I have a rule of thumb. It's like 3, healthy fat meals throughout the day. Like I have an analogy called BAB. So in the morning, big ass breakfast. Start your day with at least 30 to 40 grams of protein with fat and become the biggest meal of the day. I want your mechano stretch receptors to activate in your stomach. I want you to feel like you just came from a buffet. And this resets circadian biology with leptin and ghrelin and other cortisol issues within your GI tract with IgA and IgM. I find that works fantastic with a lot of my clients. And usually they go at least 6 to 8 hours without feeling hungry because they have the free-floating fatty acids within their bloodstreams for fuel. People who eat too small too often, it's hard on their circadian biology. But I go a standard 3 meals a day, but if they're hearty, with healthy fats, with good proteins, high quality polyphenols from your vegetables and a little bit of fruits, it's a no-brainer.
Wow, that sounds good. Have you written that down somewhere, Ameer?
No, I should.
You should. That is demonstrating mastery of the subject matter. I think that's amazing. Yeah. So I agree with everything you say. I mean, the breakfast should be big. It should be greasy, healthy grease, healthy fat, as I say, as Ameer has said. And yeah, totally agree. So I think that relating to cholesterol, the big idea, the takeaway is if you have high cholesterol, it's fixed with healthy eating, high fiber foods, get off the sugars, get off the fructose, get off the sweets, eat lean protein, healthy fats, and lots of vegetables. You cannot overdose on vegetables. And that will, for most people, bring their cholesterol down. I've found that it's actually harder to raise cholesterol in patients than bring it down. So if you have low cholesterol, it's a little more challenging because we're breaking habits. Basically they're adrenaline junkies. They love to skip meals because they get high off the catecholamine release that comes from low blood sugar. And that's, we're all guilty of that. In one way or another, every human on earth is an adrenaline junkie. Some people choose to jump off bridges and go climb mountains. Other people just skip meals, but the result is the same.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So what's our next awesome natural approach?
So our next natural approach is going to be for high blood pressure. So we're looking at lisinopril, which I'm going to double check, but I believe that is a ACE inhibitor. And what we're going to be talking about is, we're talking about they're trying to manage biology with a synthetic chemical to sort of force the body to do something. And that is when life is at risk and you're at risk of dying. That is an acceptable approach. But what medicine can do for you is keep you from falling into your grave. But as soon as you're standing on flat ground with the grave right behind you, they're going to move on to the next patient, and there's nothing that they're going to do for you. And there's a Grand Canyon-sized gap between someone who's almost just barely escaped death and someone who's fully functional, healthy, loving life, and expressing their creativity and their purpose on this earth to their fullest. That's a Grand Canyon-sized gap. And I think we make the mistake of thinking that people who aren't falling into their grave are healthy. That is not true. So that brings me back to blood pressure. Blood pressure is it's a screening tool. It's something that we look for in every patient that comes in. I check blood pressure lying down as well as standing up. That's called orthostatic blood pressure, and that tells me a lot about the adrenal system. A normal functioning human will have their blood pressure increase when they stand up from lying down because the brain has to increase blood pressure in order to get blood into the brain because of the force of gravity. Obviously, when you're standing 6 foot off the ground versus laying down, the blood has higher to go, so it needs a higher pressure. But the body always does something for a reason. Now, everybody listening needs to know this and trust this fact. It's just how your body's built. Your body is perfect, but it is not invincible. Okay, it cannot take an onslaught of GMOs and toxic stress and loss of sleep and skipping breakfast and running busy lives week after week after year and not have something start to malfunction. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your body. It's just adapting to the signals that you're giving it. So the body's the body is perfect, but it's not invincible. So when the body raises blood pressure, it's doing it for an intelligent reason. And in my understanding, the most common cause of high blood pressure is that the blood is inflamed. And what inflammation does, I mean, you can spend your lifetime studying it and you'll just barely understand it. The more you zoom in to these processes in the body, the more information there is. But what the body does when it inflames in general is it makes the blood thicker. The blood sort of turns, instead of being a clear mountain lake like you might see in the British Columbia of Canada, it becomes a muddy pond with a lot of soluble material floating around in the blood. Now, what that does is it creates viscosity changes. So just like, changing the oil in your car prevents the oil viscosity from changing. When the oil's too thick, it doesn't lubricate. Well, your blood, if it gets too thick due to inflammation, it cannot push blood into small vessels. And the smaller the vessel, the more resistance there is to pushing that thicker sludge through. So, we put oxygen saturation meters on every patient that comes in to look at oxygen saturation in the fingers. And the reason is that the fingers have tiny, tiny blood vessels, which is a reflection of the brain. The brain and other parts of your body also have tiny blood vessels. So if the fingers are getting oxygen, we know the brain is getting oxygen. So the reason that lisinopril and other ACE inhibitors are so popular relates back to the other 2 points we've discussed. That inflammation is driving a lot of the disease and dysfunction. It just depends on who you are. Some people get inflamed and they hurt. Other people get inflamed and their blood pressure goes through the roof. Your body's doing the right thing. It's trying to, when you've got this inflammation going on, your body is not doing anything wrong. It's trying to reabsorb water from the kidneys to dilute the blood back out. But because your body's a closed system, the body reabsorbs water, by default, the pressure will go up within that system. Okay, so taking lisinopril to stop that process might massage the blood pressure numbers back down. But what you're doing is you're fighting what the body's trying to do. It's much better to just work on an anti-inflammatory lifestyle And notice I said lifestyle, not just, you don't just take one supplement and your problems are solved. If only it were that easy. And it's so rewarding when you approach it as a lifestyle change. So that's where lisinopril is coming into play. All this inflammation from the modern diet and lifestyle is just it's driving the biology of the body into a pro-inflammatory state, and the body is simply reabsorbing water to dilute the blood back down to a acceptable level where it can push blood and oxygen into small vessels. So you can take lisinopril, or you can work on the lifestyle end of things naturally, the gut, healthy diet, clean food, organic, non-GMO, non-processed, avoid your sugars and refined carbs, eat lots and lots and lots of vegetables, work with someone knowledgeable about supplementation. Doing your own research is fine, but I will tell you that going into getting healthy is like going into court. You can do all the research you want on law, but do you really want to stand in front of the judge and try to do it on your own, or do you want to hire someone to help you? And obviously it makes more sense to have good counsel.
I even say even coaches need coaches. So myself, I even have practitioners I see personally because I have a biased view. You have your own biased view when you work with yourself. So you need outside eyes to look at you from an outside point of view. Like, hey, Ameer, well, maybe, this isn't the best for you because you're looking at inside the bubble. You got to step outside the bubble and you got to let other people help you. So even as a practitioner myself, I still see other people.
I think that is just an indication, Ameer, of an open-minded person who's always learning something new. If I was to wake up today and say, you know what, I'm the smartest doctor in the world, I've learned everything and nobody else out there can help me. First of all, it's never going to be true. And second of all, that would just be very ignorant. And they say that, a doctor who treats himself as a fool for a patient, that's definitely true.
Definitely. So going back to just blood viscosity for a second, I've done this personally, and I've given this little tip to my clients. It's something so simple and affordable is you can source nice organic ginger and create ginger tea. So literally just take the ginger and shred it, put it in a cup and steep it, I don't know, like 10 to 15 minutes, pour it out, and has the active compound gingerol, which is actually fantastic for vasodilation. So we actually use this sometimes as a pre-workout. So people looking to increase vasodilation and get in the mode and increase oxygen supply throughout the body, bing, bang, boom. That ginger does wonders.
Yeah, that's a very inexpensive and good home remedy. And I've done that before. Reminds me I need to do it again.
It's a bonus. It tastes good too. If people like that kind of like spicy type of tea taste, it's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's ginger. You can use ginger you can dice ginger and mix it with lemon juice and put it in your fridge and just put it on your vegetables. And if you don't like the taste of just like eating broccoli, just sprinkle some ginger mixed with lime juice, and it's a whole nother story. So
awesome. So what's our next thing? So now we have you can take some ginger, inflammatory diet. So everything comes back to like eating a natural diet. So you're talking about cholesterol, you're talking about blood pressure, you're talking about statins and all this stuff, and it comes back to lifestyle, diet, and smart supplementation, right?
I heard a quote once, and it said that intellectuals solve problems and geniuses prevent them, and we don't need to forget that often the most simple answer is most likely the right one. And, there's a lot of money to be made on complicating there's so much money to be made on A, making a problem, and B, trying to fix it. That's where the great fortunes on this planet are made from. Okay. They invent problems and then they invent the solution. Voila, they're super rich. But there's always a price that we pay with that approach. So, the simple answer is true. It comes from your gut. It comes from your dinner plate. It comes from the little things you do every day are what determine your fate. There's the genetic testing that you and I are both versed in. It's a new area. It's growing, and it plays a role, but it will never take the place of what you just said. Never will.
No, definitely not. So let's moving along. What's our next culprit that we're attacking?
Yeah, so our next one is going to be Synthroid, and that's a prescription drug used for thyroid problems. The thyroid in the functional medicine, functional nutrition world, we really look at it more like the check engine light. And if your car has a check engine light that comes on, you don't cut the light out or turn it off and keep driving. I mean, you can try that for a while, but it's not really recommended if you care about your car. Your thyroid is very similar. It's very much the most sensitive, chemically sensitive organ in your body. So thyroid hormone is used to massage the numbers on a blood test. That is what it does. And if someone takes thyroid hormone, like Synthroid or levothyroxine, long enough, their thyroid gland will atrophy and disappear. So at that point, you would be dependent on the hormone for the rest of your life. Now, I'm not saying that in some cases of thyroid cancer or serious problems that a drug like this doesn't have its place. And the same is true for these other drugs. Okay. So I'm not advocating a world without medication. I'm just advocating an educated world that uses medication only when necessary. But a thyroid hormone problem, again, we would want to look at estrogen levels. That would be one place to look at. Look at hormone levels, because high estrogen levels make the thyroid slow down. There's a binding globulin that the body makes when estrogen goes up in females. So about 90% of all thyroid problems are females. And the reason is, well, the difference between men and women is estrogen and testosterone, all things being equal. So thyroid then is affected greatly by levels of estrogen. And when estrogen levels go up, again, we're talking about women on birth control, women with estrogen toxicity, and women with the stress reaction that causes progesterone levels to drop and their estrogen levels to rise, heavy periods, lots of cramping, very difficult cycles. This is the typical pattern of someone that we see has thyroid trouble. And I think when I'm looking at thyroid issues, it's always the first thing I try to rule out are they estrogen toxic? And that's it's more common than we appreciate, I think. And so, I see the thyroid hormone use as really a band-aid to these other issues. And of course, the adrenal issue also impacts the thyroid, because cortisol levels, when they rise, inhibits the conversion of T4 to T3. So, and again, your body's not doing anything wrong. It's doing it intelligently. If you're under stress, your body's going to shut off thyroid hormone because it doesn't want to burn through your energy, because your body doesn't know if you're going to start a 6-month famine or a 6-hour famine. So
that's right.
So, we're honoring that that's what your body's doing. So, with thyroid issues, I would say probably of all the things on this list, the thyroid patient needs to find someone, a functionally minded doctor, a natural medicine, functionally minded practitioner, to really look at their body holistically, and look at their lifestyle, look at their gut health and gluten.
Look at everything. I've done extensive articles and research on that. Like, there's so many different things, and depends on your situation, from dairy to gluten to iodine to magnesium to cortisol to birth control pills, through pharmaceutical agents in water for women too that you were mentioning earlier. There's so many elements, because the thyroid system runs on a negative feedback loop. It's a domino series. You take one domino out, nothing else works, right? So it's really complex, and you're right. You need sourcing a proper practitioner to run full thyroid panels. None of this just TSH panel, just one marker. No, run the full panel. Get your T3, RT3, T4, total T4. Get your antibodies in there, TPO, TPOA, TPOB, etc. And look at the whole picture, as Dr. Andrew's talking about, the bird's eye view, the 30,000-foot view. Then you can actually see where the bridges are connecting, what's missing. Maybe you need more iodine, or maybe you need a better balance of selenium. So it's very complex when it comes to thyroid, and it's not just about, I have a thyroid problem, or I'm hyper or hypo, and I need to take one thing, and this one thing is going to solve my problem.
I could not agree more. I think that's completely agree with that. And I think that's just an illustration of all the different things that should be looked at. And, your thyroid is, if you're not checking your antibodies, if your doctor is not, if a doctor is diagnosing hypothyroidism without looking at antibodies, find a different one. Because 90% or something of hypothyroidism, roughly that number, is autoimmune related. So,
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's complex too. Then you get in the whole world of, the receptor sites, vitamin D. But honestly, a lot of it, not all of it, like a lot of it though goes back to what we're talking about. Once again, go figure, is healing the integrity of your GI tract.
Yes, disease and therefore health starts and ends in your gut. So I would agree.
Cool. All right, moving on. What's our next victim?
The next one we're going to take out, the next one we're going to obliterate here is the omeprazole, the PPI, the purple pill. This is a very dangerous drug. It seems like it's just that pill that makes my heartburn go away, but it has very nefarious consequences. And this is something I'm kind of passionate about this one because I get so frustrated when I see a patient who's been on a proton pump inhibitor for 4 years or 7 years.
Yes, exactly.
That is terrible because what has happened let me just educate real quick on the stomach. The stomach is not part of your body. It is a tube, just like the rest of the GI tract, just like the hole inside of a bagel. When you eat something and swallow it, it's like imagine a bagel on a tan bagel on a blue plate, and you drop a little piece of bean or a piece of lettuce into that hole. That's all you've done when you've swallowed something. It's not in your body. It's just running down the tube. And if things happen correctly, you will digest it and it will become part of your body, but it's not guaranteed that it will go into your tissue. And so the stomach really is like the first major player in proper digestion, and the stomach has to be acidic. I was really confused as a student as to the natural idea that most antacids, most acid reflux was caused by too little acid. I couldn't quite connect those two because how can the symptom of acid actually be caused by too little acid? But like all things that irritate me, I just did more research on, and it does actually prove itself to be true physiologically. The stomach is basically an oven with two doors. And the top door near the upper end is called the esophageal sphincter or the cardiac sphincter. And it's like a door. It's a muscular door that opens and closes as you eat. And it actually depends on acid in the stomach to shut. So if you don't have acid in your stomach, the door to the oven will not shut. And if the oven door is left open and the recipe says broil, and you set the thermo to broil, it will only get to 200 degrees. Your food will not cook. That's the metaphor for how these proton pump inhibitors destroy digestion. They shut off the heat to prevent the oven door from closing the top sphincter of the stomach. And so when the acid level in the stomach goes from 3, where it should be, up to 4 or 5, food is not broken down. And then this creates a situation where if your food isn't broken down and your stomach is not acidic, the gallbladder and the pancreas do not get the chemical signals that they need in order to release their enzymes and the bile that allows you to really fully get the nutrition out of your food. So as innocent as a proton pump inhibitor seems like, or as effective as it is at eliminating acid, it's really just shutting off all acid production. It's not ever solving the problem. So I see this as a big problem long term, because patients will become malnourished on the nutrients that are necessary for life. All the minerals, the calcium, the magnesiums, the micro minerals in vegetables and food, the B12, everything from protein to vegetables won't be broken down.
No, I can't even imagine what's going on with the intrinsic factor. Holy moly!
I mean, holy moly! That can cause MS-like problems in someone, right? I mean, that can cause neurologic degeneration. And the moral of the story with patients like this, these are some of the sickest patients I see in terms of malnourishment. I mean, they're going to have osteopenia or osteoporosis, and that's a known side effect of these drugs. These drugs will cause in the medical literature itself, they are known to cause B12 deficiency, pneumonia, because bugs in your gut will crawl up through the stomach and you will inhale them when you're laying on your back at night, and they will take up residence in your lungs and cause infections and hip fracture. It's terrible. Hip fracture risk goes way up on people who have been on proton pump inhibitors a long time, and that indicates how loss of stomach acid loses your ability to absorb calcium, and so your bones slowly demineralize until one day you step off the curb and you're sent to the floor. And that's not good, because breaking your hip increases your mortality greatly over the next 5 years. So proton pump inhibitors, very bad. The way you fix it, you de-stress, you do everything we've talked about, but typically what we do with patients is we give them stomach acid replacement that they take right after they eat. That's our.
Are you talking about HCl?
I'm talking about HCl, my friend.
Good old-fashioned HCl.
Yeah. Simple, but so important. And we like to have patients chew their food and eat their food and try to make all the stomach acid they can. And we have them take it right at the end of the meal. And we have a kind of an algorithm or a way to figure out what their dose is that we give our patients. But I'd be happy to offer that to any of your listeners out there that were interested. But HCl is the most important part of the digestive process. In my opinion, it has to be taken care of for the other things downstream to work correctly.
Yeah, 100%. And like you're mentioning earlier, without sufficient hydrochloric acid, you don't activate and stimulate pancreatic enzymes. You don't activate bile that you need. Your liver doesn't work good, and everything else downstream goes poo-pooed. So yeah, it's very important. And because of our stressed out life, because a lot of people are abusing proton pump inhibitors, overindulgence of caffeinated drinks, soda pops, high carb, high fructose, the list goes on. And all this is literally depleting your HCl. I find it funny though, because people think because they have heartburn or GERD, they have too much acid. When in reality, it's the opposite, because you're mentioning earlier the esophageal sphincter is actually, it starts opening the valve because it's opening to receive food, because if you receive food, you'll increase your HCl. So anytime you're having heartburn or any of that type of feeling, that's because your HCl is low, not high, it's low.
Absolutely right. So it's a paradox, but with a little bit of understanding, it shows itself to be physiologically true. Definitely.
You know what I noticed helps with HCl? Ginger tea, once again.
Man, ginger is amazing for the GI tract. And yeah, so drink your ginger tea. I'm going to make some ASAP.
Yeah, ginger tea is fantastic. And that thing with the lemon too. So you can make like ginger lemon tea, anything. Even lemons are great for helping the HCl. And I do want to add one thing though. I've noticed that some people, they may not react 100% accordingly to HCl, because it is a negative feedback loop between your stomach, your pancreas, and your brain and your mouth and the saliva there. So sometimes simple stuff like Swedish bitters do a fantastic job, or any of these bitter families. It's a different approach, but I've seen great results with it.
I really like that idea, Ameer. And that reminds me, I want to mention that probably 90+% of patients that I suggest use HCl tolerate it very well. But sometimes the lining of the stomach is so weak and atrophied, or if there's an active gastritis or ulcer, then HCl is absolutely contraindicated, because until that gastric lining is healed, the HCl will actually increase the damage. So again, if there's always that reality that if it's great for one person, it may be good for that person who has the gastritis, but it has to be used at a later date after the stomach lining has healed some.
Yeah, I agree. It was funny. What was I reading before? I'll leave it in the show notes, but a fascinating article actually showing the connection between proper circadian sleeping and the production of HCl, because circadian eating is entwined in our biology. We can't eat when we want. We ate according to when the sun rose and when the sun set. So there's actual circadian expressions of genes in our body that releases throughout the day more HCl. So that's the prime time to eat. And it was fascinating. They're showing the link between lack of sleep and a lack of HCl.
My goodness, Ameer, I think your understanding of sleep, I really like your handle of that subject. And I think that sleep is the most important vitamin that we don't get enough of. Yeah, I do think that's true.
Yeah, definitely. So who's our next person or next, I like to call them victims. Yeah, our next victims.
The next thing we're going to blow holes through here will be, we're going to do 2 for 1. This is going to be a 2 birds with 1 stone, because cool. the next 2 are antibiotics. And in case your listeners aren't aware, an antibiotic only kills bacteria. That's it. It destroys the ability of that bacteria to multiply, probably by disrupting its, having some effect on the bacteria, which would sort of be a mitochondrial toxin. And I think a lot of the mitochondrial problems that are out there probably result from some side effects of antibiotics being used, because the similarities between the bacteria and the mitochondria are kind of interesting. But antibiotics are used for symptoms when doctors have done no testing whatsoever to determine if it's a fungal, viral, or bacterial infection. And that kind of approach, it's sort of like they give antibiotics willy-nilly and symptoms go away and they assume, well, it must have been an antibiotic problem. And in fact, it could have been a fungal issue, but by killing all the bacteria, you took pressure off the immune system for a little while, and then the immune system killed the fungus, but now you're left with a totally obliterated GI tract. So every time an antibiotic goes into the human body, and there are some cases where antibiotics save lives. Obviously, I'm not not saying.
Yeah, it's good for emergency cases when you need it ASAP, but more or less, we abuse antibiotics. It's like a nuclear bomb, as Dr. Andrew was talking about. You take an antibiotic because.
Yeah, that bomb goes off, and all those trees, those big old growth, rich 500-year-old trees in your gut are blown to pieces. And then all the invasive species come in and take advantage of the sunlight. That's what happens in your gut. It takes a while to rebuild that forest with the right kind of probiotics. And again, I would just say to work with someone, of Ameer's caliber, or myself, or other doctors in your area who really know the differences between probiotics and which strains you need and the quality ones, because anyone on antibiotics will have to restore their gut. And very likely, I have noticed that patients who have been on antibiotics who then try to do a detox where they're using medical foods or things that have some carbohydrates in them, they can actually have a yeast infection or a yeast reaction even on a quote-unquote very healthy detox. So I've learned to really make sure that yeast problem is taken care of in the gut, because antibiotics, that nuclear bomb Ameer's talking about that goes off, the yeast is kind of like the cockroach that survives the bomb. It's going to live, and then there's no more competition for resources, so the yeast is just going to go crazy. And there's 100 million prescriptions every year in America. Probably a fraction of that is actually necessary. And we're starting to get to the point now where bugs that we're trying to kill are completely antibiotic resistant. So we have some legitimate dangers to all of our health. If they continue to use antibiotics the way they are, the bugs are mutating around it, which is that's what life does. Life survives.
That's epigenetics. So, you are the product of your environment. It's like someone pushing you and pushing you and pushing you and pushing you. Eventually, you're going to push back.
Yeah, and if you learn to fight from a young age and you're fighting for your life the whole time, you learn to fight pretty well and you get stronger. And that's what these bugs are doing, right?
That's right. So what are some what are some simple guidelines that people can do to, I want to say guarantee, there's no such thing as guarantee, but to ensure that their gut biome is quite healthy?
Well, I think we've touched on several of those so far. I mean, I think that, soluble fiber feeds the good bacteria. They produce short-chain fatty acids as a result. I think consuming short-chain fatty acids, avoid trans fats, avoid rancid fats. And if you don't know what that word means, look it up and do some reading. It's pretty important. You need to eat fats that are unrefined, coconut oil that's unrefined, olive oil that's unrefined, lots of choline, working on the choline pathway of the choline is such an important nutrient. It's in short supply in our diet, and most people aren't getting enough. And it's like a fat soluble layer of protection across the mucosa of your gut. And so basically, sleeping. I think that Ameer, getting sleep, because there's an infinite benefit to the human body to getting the right kind of rest, and your gut needs to repair itself because the gut is the most metabolically active tissue in your body. I mean, when you go to the bathroom and you have a bowel movement, most of what you see in the toilet's your own dead cells because of the fast turnover in your gut. So anything that stresses you out, the first place your body doesn't have resources to make ends meet is in the gut.
Oh
So
yeah, I always tell people like I'll just go into a little geeky science here for a quick second, but when you don't have a proper circadian cycle, you're gonna raise a cytokine or interleukin 6 in your body, and this interleukin 6 is gonna start extremely rapidly depleting your primary hormone DHEA. And when DHEA starts getting depleted, vitamin D starts getting depleted, magnesium starts getting depleted. So this one cytokine, this interleukin 6 son of a gun, is causing you crazy problems, all due to the fact that you're going to bed at midnight and maybe you're staring at your computer before bed. I don't know what the situation is, but bottom line is ditch the electronics and go to bed. And that's it's free. Win-win, hello, it's absolutely free, and it has exponential benefits for you.
Ameer, if we could just, as a country, just take 10 minutes off every night, like you say, just turn off all the lights except for some real dim ones, and just go outside and look at the stars, the moon for 10 minutes, and take a few deep breaths, and then go to bed. It would change the world, man.
It would save trillions of dollars worldwide. Trillions. And people I find it fascinating because it wasn't too long ago. It was literally right before World War II, so the 1940s, that the average North American slept 10 hours, because even then most people didn't have access to certain electricities or these artificial lights that we have today. That's not too long ago, in World War II only, right? And right now, on average, reported by WHO, the World Health Organization for North America, I think we're looking at, on average, around 5.5 to 6 hours maximum of sleep. And that's like and I've done a survey of over 10,000 people, and most people go to bed anywhere from midnight to 1 a.m. every single day, but wake up at 6 a.m.
That's the only the only people that benefits is the people who are making money off our suffering, basically. And I love that idea. And I think that there's a misnomer out there that people are healthier today, we're living longer than we did in the past, and then that's actually factually untrue. When studies were performed on longevity around the turn of the century, there's a major statistical error made in that they didn't correct for infant mortality. So obviously the living conditions were very dirty, and there's a lot of disease. People were pooping where they were eating, et cetera, which spreads disease. And so infants would die, unfortunately, at a high rate. And so when they calculated lifespan, that really pushed the average down. But if you correct for like 5 years of age and older, people were living longer in the early 1900s than we are today.
Yeah, definitely. So if we had to summarize, what would you tell our audience is your number one optimal health tip? Like if you had like one simple thing to teach somebody to change their life.
That is a pretty intense question. I would say that I think that we live and die by digestion. And as you pointed out very eloquently so far, sleep plays a huge role in that. But what I would suggest to my patients and to people listening is this: think of you, your conscious self, as the guardian of 100 trillion toddlers that live inside your body. And these 100 trillion toddlers depend on you for their sustenance and for you to tell them that the world's an okay place. If you skip meals, if you abuse your body, if you eat bad food, if you don't, if you stay up all hours of the night, the signals that you give your 100 trillion cells is that the world is a dangerous place. That's an epigenetic signal to every cell in your body, and your cells will not act the way they won't behave the way you would like them to. So treat your body well and understand that you have a responsibility for everybody that lives inside you, these toddlers, and they want to be better. They want to do the best for you. They want to make you feel good, and they will if you start to treat them right. So, I'm kind of a little philosophy there, but I think it's important to realize that the decisions we make consciously affect every cell in our body. And so be conscious of your eating habits and don't skip meals. I started talking about that in the beginning, and I want you to continue to learn and don't go without eating, because starving yourself is not the way to lose weight or be healthy. It's actually the exact opposite.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more. Okay, Dr. Andrew, where can people reach you at?
I can be reached via the internet. My website is redmountainclinic.com, just like it's spelled just like it sounds, Red Mountain Clinic. And anyone who's interested in getting in touch or learning more about what I could do to help them will be able to find my contact information there.
You heard it, Optimal Nation. Go check out Dr. Andrew's website. It's loaded full of information. It's Ameer approved. Dr. Andrew, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, and have an incredible day.
Ameer, thanks to you too. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.